Superheroes shouldn't be political. You ever heard that nugget of knowledge before? Well, I'm here to tell you today, ladies and gentlemen, it's false. It's not true, and I'm going to explain why using my favorite superhero, Spider-Man. No, but actually, this is a topic that is super fascinating to me because you have these superheroes that we look up to as kids our whole lives, right? These fictional beings like Superman and Spider-Man and all the rest. Pick your favorites. But they're used to tell stories that impact the real world in these really interesting ways. And I see a lot of people trying to say that, no, they're just fun. What are you talking about? You're stupid. Well, no, there's a really good point to these stories. And going back through my favorite superhero, Spider Man's history, there's so much politics there. It's actually a little bit out of control. It's crazy. But it's so interesting seeing how these different writers will actually pick apart and look at these different aspects of our life, our society, and comment on them through the lens of somebody like Peter Parker. So, of course, I picked Spider Man because that's what we do here. But I really just wanted to address that because you go back and you'll see how stupid comments like that are. You see old Superman comics, one of the first ones where he's like, you see him picking up a car and smashing it across the sidewalk or something, right? You're like, Superman, why'd you do that? And you'll ask Superman. He'll be like, oh, well, I did that because automobiles kill people. So we got to get rid of them. We got to kill all the automobiles so everyone can be safe. And I'm like, Superman, that's out of control. But that's just how it was back then. That was the morals of the story. So, yeah, it's been happening for a while. That one I just referenced was from like the 1940s. But in the 60s, Marvel did something interesting at the time, which was just putting superheroes in the real world. So, of course, when you have someone like Spider-Man, this young kid who's got all this responsibility, he has to navigate the world with all these powers, right? You're going to find a lot of political influences there, starting, of course, with Stan Lee, who really did a lot of the heavy lifting at the start there. Now, what sets the stage is so well for this discussion in Spider-Man comics specifically is that Spider-Man's about being confused in the world. It's about not understanding what it means to have responsibility and to match your power appropriately, right? Is responsibility being strong and powerful and possessing the ability to stand up for those you care about? I don't know. Maybe it's thinking about not what others can do for you, but what you can do for others. That seems like something Spider-Man would do, right? But he doesn't know at this point in time, which he's just starting out in the 1960s. But as he goes on in life, like we all do, he builds a political mind through the injustices and issues he experiences. Just as we go, yeah, what's happening over there in that part of the world is really fucked up. Spider-Man would do the same thing, just in a different fictionalized ways, but they won't always be fictionalized. And what I mean by that is in Amazing Spider-Man 68 through 70, we get our first real look at the hero that he would become. Because in these issues, there are protests going on. Peter Parker's at college at the time, and there are protests going on for low-rent student housing. You have big Tubbo Man, the Kingpin, who comes in here and he's like, I'm going to pin this on the protesters. And he does so, and they go to jail, and it's terrible, right? Because they didn't do anything wrong. They were fighting, and they caused damage, which gets blamed on the protesters. And the robbery that Kingpin did gets blamed on the protesters. But really, they're not at fault. They just want fucking low-rent housing. Like, anyone would in their situation. And we get this beautiful set of panels where Randy Robertson, one of the main people involved, Joe Robertson's son, who works at the Daily Bugle, have a little talk about what it means to be black and young in America at the time. And it's a really interesting piece. It's kind of powerful. Even to this day, it holds up. They talk about living things down in the white man's establishment, becoming tough because of their fathers and the people who are integrating to the society. Randy says here, you've become part of the establishment, the white man's establishment. I've got to live that down. And his father, in response to that, says to him, but isn't this what we all want? What we're all fighting for? To make it on our own. To prove we're as good or better than anyone. And they don't give you the answer. They don't tell you what to think. But what Stan Lee does do is he presents the situation, raises awareness for it, and lets the reader think about it. This is kind of fucked up, is it not? But what's the answer? What's the answer? Just to keep trying hard. Keep trying your best every day. And that's not political even. That's just a life lesson. Of course, at the end of the story, the protesters are freed. We get photo evidence that Spider-Man and the Kingpin were battling, and Kingpin was stealing this tablet, and the protesters didn't do any of that, right? Like, so what's going on? Everyone is happy for the time being. They get their low rent housing, everything's cool. It doesn't happen like that in real life all the time, it does sometimes. But moving on, the next time politics were introduced were much more explicit of a stance, much more hard of a stance. In Amazing Spider-Man 91 and 92, Stan Lee goes hard and goes in against fearmongers. So you get this this absolutely shocking similarity here between some, candidates of our present time almost. But there is this mayor of New York City. He's got this motto, law and order. It has a few similarities in common with other slogans that we still see today. Sam Bullitt is campaigning for law and order, which, what does that look like? Whose kind of law, whose kind of order is what is asked by Joe Robertson, the goat of these early political issues, honestly. And J. Jonah Jameson gets wind of this, and he's like, law and order? Man, that sounds great. Sign me up. And he gets signed up, and he regrets it, of course, because my goat, J. Jonah Jameson, is not stupid. Anyone who tries to spread the truth about this guy, they fucking get banged up. They get, oh my god, it's terrible. And Peter Parker, when he sees all this, he's like, hey, fuck this guy, Mr. Jameson. And J. Jonah's like, oh, he's gonna get hurt. But and he goes outside, and he's like knocked over the head, and you're like, oh my god, whoa, what's going on here? And he's like, yeah, keep your mouth shut, boy. And he's like, Spider-Man's on the case, you know what I'm saying? And he finds out that Joe Robertson, whose kind of hate, whose kind of order, is enveloped in the same exact thing, where he gets kidnapped in silence because he was trying to tell people the truth. This guy's a racist, this guy's allegiances to crime, he's a fucking murderer, he's a terrible human being, right? It feels like a parody sometimes, almost, of like our modern political climate, which is kind of wild, because this guy, Sam Bullitt, he's all crime and bribery, hate and rage, and it's, you know what, it's I guess it was a valid political campaign back then too. But in the end of the comic, Sam Bullitt's men admit what they did, and Sam Bullitt's like, no, my boys, you can't leave me. But they leave him, so that's great. They would never squeal on me, but they squealed on him, so it's like, tough shit, buddy. And you get up out of there onto the next political issue. And J. Jonah Jameson gets some character development because he's like, yeah, I'm not going to trust fucking racists anymore. That's great. That's great. W. Jonah. But moving on, we have probably one that maybe some of you have heard of before. It is the famous anti-drug arc. Now, this story is very interesting because not only it is a big fight with the Green Goblin, with Spider-Man, with Harry Osborn caught in the middle, which is always, I don't want to say a good time because it's kind of, you know what I'm saying? It's a little bit shaky in terms of the subject matter because it can be hard to sit through some of the abusive topics that are talked about here. This one went so hard into an anti-drug message just because Stan Lee thought it was important to talk about, to spread to the youth. He thought that if he had a power to speak on an issue and it was relevant, he could do some good, then he would do that good, which, hey, I respect that. So he goes into this anti-drug arc and he tries to release it, and they tell him, hey, the Comics Code Authority isn't gonna let that slide, Stan. And Stan's like, yeah, well, I'll do it anyways, okay? Understand? I will publish it and people will buy it. Because it's Spider-Man and I'm Stan Lee. And by the way, sales at this time were better than they were ever, I think. I don't think definitely not better presently. So this was a big move, is what I mean to say. The actual story focused on Harry Osborn just going through a terrible time, unfortunately. He was having terrible luck with women. He thought the whole world hated him. He thought his best friend was like out to get him, and the only way he could get away from all of it was by popping pills. No, that's not very nuanced, or even an accurate depiction of how things would result today, I don't think. But it is important for the time. He gets to understand just how terrible these things are, how they tear people apart, how they can kill people. And at the end of the day, he gets to be there by his best friend's side and really just help him through the process. And he defeats the Green Goblin just by showing him the fact that his son is having this fucking nightmare. And the Green Goblin snaps back into Norman Osborn because he's like, hey, that's my son. I have to go to him. Stan Lee's next issue that he tackled was actually the privacy reform protests that happened in Amazing Spider-Man 105 to 107, which was just a few issues after the last one. So he's really just going in towards the end of his run, chopping out all these political issues, more than any other writer in the history of Spider-Man. No, there's not a lot to this one. It's just like, don't fucking listen to the government invading your privacy, because there could be a nefarious supervillain behind it. In this case, it was Spencer Smith, which was the original guy who created the Spider Slayer robots for J. Jonah Jameson. He was, trying to watch all over, find out Spider-Man's secret identity, but in doing so, he upset the surveillance system of the entire city, effectively, right? Which led to tons of protests, which led to, Spider-Man then being able to save the day. So, pretty simple one, but still an important issue to bring up and bring awareness to. And finally, the last political Stan Lee's comic book story for Spider-Man was actually Amazing Spider-Man 99, in which Spider-Man explicitly protests for prison reform. So Peter Parker gets this assignment to go and, photograph and follow up a story on the prison system in this one area and see what's going on here, because there's a stick up. There's prisoners who are rioting all over the place. It's out of control. He has to figure out what's going on here. And effectively, he realizes that their complaints are not getting to the warden. They're getting stopped because of prison corruption, and they're getting treated terribly and all of this. So Spider-Man goes to the warden, and he basically sorts everything out. The warden didn't know about any of this. It was all the lower levels that were holding up the information and trying to just take advantage of these prisoners. That's not enough. That's ordinarily where the story would end. But he goes on this television show after this, a late-night talk show. He delivers this great speech about how we should all listen to prison reform and we have to be active in our efforts to change this system. How young first offenders are put in the same cells as these horrible, evil criminals. That makes these jails just a breeding grounds for crime. He talks about how they're held up in jail for months and months and months, because there's not enough judges and there's not enough courts, and basically it's all out of control. It's everyone's problem, and we have to come together and solve it. Which, great! I think this is wonderful, honestly. It's really heavy-handed, and you can tell this is just Spider-Man talking about an actual political topic. This isn't just a story. This isn't just Magic Land. It's not Spider-Man having fun. It's, hey, this fucking sucks in the real world, and more people have to start noticing this. After that, we move on to the Jerry Conway era. Now, Jerry Conway, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. He took over Spider-Man when he was, I think, just 18 or 19 years old. And he's probably best known for a story called The Night Gwen Stacy Died. Sorry, spoilers! 60-year-old story at this point, which is the turning point for Spider-Man. It's what made all of comics a lot more serious, so he has everyone's eternal respect for that, I think. He was the one who would bring the drug abuse back into play in a really harrowing way that still called back to the roots of this issue just being so terrible, so unbelievably horrible, that more people just need to know about it. Because in the stories, Harry Osborn is in a terrible position. That's what fuels both Peter and Norman's anger towards each other leading up to this moment on the bridge, which you all probably know about, to be honest. And it doesn't end there, because that's the point he's making. This is a cycle. It's not just one isolated incident. It's continuous, and it's going to continue evolving in terrible, terrible ways until we finally, as a society, stand up and do something about it. And so in issues 136 to 137, you see Harry Osborn just go off the deep end again. He's lost his father at this point. He's in distress. Nothing's working out for him in the world. And he just goes crazy. He becomes the Green Goblin. He thinks he is the Green Goblin. And Spider-Man has to deal with that. But at the end of the story, what makes this interesting is, at the end of the story, he doesn't just say, bam, pow, 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 you know what I'm saying? Get out of here, you fucking lunatic. He goes, hey, whatever you can give him, I'm happy to provide. Because that's my best friend. Which understands, of course, that you shouldn't just jail these people and throw away the key. That's not it at all. You have to stay there with them, and you have to help them through this process, because chances are nobody else will. Now, there were some other stories in between Jerry Conway's original run on Spider-Man and this next era I'll talk about in a moment, like misinformation and student protests, which were in the other Spider-Man comic book, The Spectacular Spider-Man. Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man, number 9 and number 10 both dealt with same student protests, sort of, where misinformation was being spread. Everything was entirely miscommunicated. Spider-Man ends up fighting this guy called the White Tiger over this huge misunderstanding, and the point of the story is just that things can sometimes be blown out of proportion to such an extent that it's just ridiculous, right? Like, it's out of control how some of these political situations grow and develop and become separated from reality to such an extent that we don't really know what's going on. And tensions just flare up. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of these politicians nowadays will do. They'll just flare up these issues until there's no logic left in the world. There's just hatred. There's not policy. There's just hatred. And I think that's a pretty miserable experience. And I think Spider-Man would agree with me. But on to that aforementioned next era, the Roger Stern era. Now, Roger Stern wasn't somebody who delved a ton into politics, but of course, his stories would naturally kind of coalesce and grow into political statements of some kind, political elements, if not statements, you know? So yeah, while not overtly political, Stern's run takes a firm stance against big evil corporations, or even corporations that you might not believe are evil, but they probably are, charging us, the readers, with looking at all the social injustices that these big businesses may be committing behind closed doors, these suits and ties that are just trying to find a way to manipulate the public into the way that best serves their interests. And now, well, hopefully it's not as horrific as some of the stories here, which were like found in Amazing Spider-Man 233 to 236, where the businesses turn people into giant mutated tarantulas who jump off buildings. Things are probably a little bit more grounded than that. However, the dangers of big businesses cannot be understated, which I think is the point it's making. It's not like, hey, you know, fucking Walmart is making tarantulas to try and kill all its enemies. I don't think that's the case, but yeah. And we also get some commentary on ethical experimentation in the same vein, that same story. And at the end of the story, it really just hit me that this is just like a terrible ending, you know, because Spider-Man is, spoilers for the fate of the tarantula, if you are interested in reading about that character. The original one, anyways. There's been a few, I think. But the tarantula becomes this gigantic, mutated, actual, like, fuzzy tarantula. It's terrifying. It's hideous. I don't like it. But it's attacking Spider-Man. It's trying to get its revenge. And at the end, when it realizes it can't, it just starts wanting to die. And it jumps off the roof, and it plummets down, and it crashes, and Spider-Man can just look on in horror as it happens. And he feels sick, because he can't save him. And then the next day, Peter Parker's at the Daily Bugle again. They're watching TV, and they're like, we did an expose on this big business. This is great. They're going to be run out of town. But you see the parent corporation on the TV, and it's just like a cycle of never-ending nonsense. Because you know the people who are really at fault for this, they're not going to be punished by an expose like this, or any kind of like interference that, you know, someone like Spider-Man or any superhero could be able to do. It's a much more deep-seated issue, and that's what I think was so brilliant about Roger Stern pointing this out during this story. Now, the second Roger Stern story I wanted to talk about really isn't political at all, but it was his last story, and I think it has his thesis statement regarding Spider-Man and the way he approached Spider-Man's relationship to social injustices and political issues. It's from Amazing Spider-Man 252, which you might know as the one where he returns with the black costume. And he returns from this big galactic battle that him and all the other superheroes have, which is called Secret Wars. The one from 1984, where they're fighting the Beyonder and Doctor Doom and all the villains, and it's terrible, and they get destroyed under a mountain at one point. It's criminal. It is a fun story to read, but it is pretty miserable for everyone involved. So when they get back, they're like, the world is amazing. Appreciate it. And that's what he's saying here. Spider-Man comes back. He gets back into his normal life. He's bouncing all over the place. I think he like kisses a cop on the forehead or something. That could just be another issue of Artisan Spider-Man. He was doing goofy shit like that a lot. The story centers around the fact that Spider-Man's just loving life again. He has this great new alien costume which can do all sorts of things for him. No backfiring there, of course. Why would that happen? But what ends up going on is he sees these two teenagers who are having this conflict, right? They're fighting, and I'm gonna get you. You don't understand the way the world works. Don't break up with me. I'm gonna break up with you. And Spider-Man sees these guys, and he's this goofy attitude, and he's like, "Hey, what's going on here, guys? I mean, can't you see that the world around you is it's amazing?" And I'm going to show you, alright? I'm not going to let you not understand this with me. So come on, come with me. He grabs them up and he swings off with these terrified young teenagers. He's like, "What the fuck are you doing, Spider-Man? What's going on?" But Spider-Man doesn't really care at this point. He's swinging around. He's like, look all around you at this world. Yeah, there's a lot of filth and there's a lot of mud and there's a lot of chaos, but really look at the city. Like, this time of night is beautiful out here and you're not appreciating it. You get to live here. And it's miraculous. It's a magical land of New York City. Yeah, there's a lot of weirdos. And there's a lot of strange people around. I'm not even one of the weird ones. But that's what's amazing about the world. It's all possible here. Which just seems like a really good footnote to end his run off on. Even though he kind of got pushed out, to my understanding. But moving on, we get into some more divisive political topics. With the Bill Mantlo run on Spectacular Spider-Man. He introduces in Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man number 64, these two superheroes called Cloak and Dagger. And they are born out of drug abuse. So we're going back to that topic for a little bit here. They're trying to go and absolutely just eradicate the people who have kind of infested their streets with this junk and killed so many people. And Spider-Man's like, "No, we can't kill them. They have to come to justice." And the story becomes a little bit more about that, but the drug abuse is always at the center, how it just destroys lives, how it produced vengeance, and just the cycle of misery. Just harping more on that because it is important to bring up. You also have some ridiculous issues during this time that technically deal with political topics. Like, there's this one Punisher-centric issue where Punisher's just going around and he's like, "That guy's littering. I'm gonna light him up." So it's pretty funny. The next topic is probably the most interesting issue of Spider-Man that Bill Mantlo ever wrote for me. And it is The Spectacular Spider-Man number 71, the issue that deals with gun control. So the issue is about all the gun deaths in America. Peter Parker's out on patrol one day. He noticed somebody's getting robbed. He goes in. He tries to, do what he does best. Fight crime, save the situation. You know what I'm saying? He's like, Spider-Man does whatever Spider can. Thwip, done, we're out of here. But that's not what happens. The clerk has a gun. And he has the right to shoot whoever has broken into his home. So he does. And Spider-Man's there. And his automatic little camera is catching the whole situation on film. And he's at the Daily Bugle the next day. And he's just depressed. He's thinking, "Oh my God. Hey, this sucks. And somebody has to do something about this." Look at the stats. There's a shipment of all these legal and illegal guns coming in. Just flooding into New York, the streets. And Spider-Man goes and tries to stop it. And he does his damn best. But it can't really stop all the other issues in the world, At the end of the issue, he comes in, he's like, "Oh yeah, well, Spider-Man was doing that. There were over 1,000 gun deaths in New York City," or something to that effect. And Spider-Man's just miserable. Because how do you stop it? And that's one I really don't know. Out of all these political topics, I, have a pretty firm stance on most of them. I think gun control is a little bit more interesting, right? Because gun control infringes upon multiple rights, right? We have the right to bear arms as Americans, which I think all people should have that right, unless you are proven to be abusive or you're just a generally terrible person who can't be trusted with their hands, with their emotions, whatever the case may be. I don't think that person should have a gun. I think you should be able to take a test to prove that you are a competent individual. You're not mentally ill or anything like that. And it's a little bit too easy right now. I think that might be an understatement, but yeah. However, you should have the right to protect yourself. Is there a better way than just shooting someone who comes in here that's a young kid that's misguided? And yeah, probably. But most Americans aren't going to want to entertain that. They're tired of things like this. So just shoot. It's just a sad issue because there are no answers here. It's just a situation presented fully with all the nuances involved. If I had to say one more thing on this gun control topic, because this is my favorite of Bill Mantlow's issues, I think I would say that guns themselves are not the problem. It is always the public. Oftentimes politicians will say, it's the gun's fault, we gotta get rid of all the guns. And that's just something politicians will do when there is not an easy way out otherwise. Just blame it on this one thing that can be tangibly fought against, and you won't have to actually rework your policies or take any bold policies in any interesting way. Like, oh yeah, guns suck because, they're killing people. Get them out of here. That's not the answer to anything, I don't think. I don't have the answer, but I know it's not that. It's definitely something I'm still making up my mind on. When I was younger, this really helped me to think about it. So, great issue here from Bill Mantlo. Now, Bill Mantlow's other two issues dealt with mental illness in Spectacular Spider-Man number 74 and landlords and price gouging in Spectacular Spider-Man number 120, which are some really fascinating issues to do Spider-Man topics on. And the final issue, as I mentioned, landlords and price gouging, it's really potent even today. And after reading this, I think it's really hard to be like, yeah, landlords, let's go. Because they suck. So, to explain, this issue is about how landlords will work with kind of terrible people in an attempt to force out poor people from their establishment so they can maximize their profits. A landlord hires some firebugs to do just that and burn down and terrify these people in this apartment so that they will move out and they won't have to deal with them anymore effectively. The Keith Giffen art in this is also just wonderful because I believe this is the only time he drew Spider-Man, and it's great. And as Bill Mantlo himself says in this issue, greed lies at the root of the problem. The greed for higher rents than most of us can afford, but we can fight greed. Greed and fear are powerful enemies, but we possess a greater power still, the vote. If every one of you who signs cast a vote for safe, affordable housing, no one in this city fear being driven from his or her home ever again. And it fades to black just on that comment. She ends up signing at the very end there. And it's a really cool transition into someone who is experiencing all these political situations throughout the city and growing with them and growing his mind and his intellect and not engaging with them just on a surface level, but hey, fuck this guy, Mr. Jameson, on a level that we all should aspire to. And he finally takes that leap in this issue to become genuinely involved in the political situation here and make a difference so we can save more people.